Welcome to the Weekly Spanish Review. This is for Mr. Jones's Spanish 2 class, and we're in the final week before winter break. This week I want to go over everything we've learned so far and do a recap of what all Spanish 2 students should know by now. At the beginning of the year we did a recap of Spanish 1. So we should all know by now how to introduce ourselves and talk about yourselves. We should know basic phrases like buenos días, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien, gracias. And then also using ser and tener to talk about ourselves. Like, yo soy un alumno. Yo soy inteligente. Tengo dos hermanos. You also need to be able to talk in the present tense, using those AR, ER, IR verbs, and talking about your daily activities, your hobbies. We need to be able to say things like, yo como cereal en la mañana. Estudio todos los días para mis clases. Juego deportes con mis amigos. Me gusta el baloncesto. Es mi deporte favorito. En la noche miro televisión y escucho música. As you can see on the screen right here, we know how to conjugate verbs. Like comer would be como. Estudiar, which means to study, would be estudio. And then we're also using the vocab that we've learned all throughout Spanish classes, like cereal for food, and then clases like we learned in Unit 2. Also about deportes in Unit 5 when we learned about sports. Alright, moving on to some of the more specific things that we've studied this year. We saw the difference between ser and estar. If we remember back to Unit 6, when we learned about medical vocab in the doctor's office, we learned that ser is permanent and estar is just temporary. So I'll give you some examples right here. Here are a few examples of ser, and remember those are yo soy, tú eres, él, ella, usted es, nosotros somos, ellos, ustedes son. So these are things that are always true. Yo soy gracioso. I am funny. I'm from Florida. Yo soy de Florida. Now this year we've learned estar, which is no. That's temporary, to be. So we learned the word tired, like cansado. So yo estoy cansado. That's temporary. We could talk about things like right now, like being in the class. That's temporary. Ellos están en la clase ahora. Another grammar point we've seen is AR verbs in the past tense. Now I won't list all of them, but if you ever have any doubts, remember all your notes are on Google Classroom, so you can go back and see all the things that we've done this year. Whether that's grammar, vocabulary, the activities that we've done, everything's going to be on Google Classroom, so make sure to use that as an example to study. So past tense AR, we need to be able to use words like nadar in the past tense, which means to swim. So in this sentence, I swam in the ocean last week. Yo nadé en el mar la semana pasada. And remember our strong accents when we have these. Yo nadé. They watched a movie last night. Ellos miraron una película anoche. And then this last example, we've got the verb hablar. Remember our past tense ending with tú is haste. So, tú hablaste con el profesor ayer. After AR past tense, we learned ER and IR past tense. So one of our ER verbs is comer. So in this sentence, we're going to use past tense for comer. She ate cake in the birthday party. Ella comió un pastel en la fiesta de cumpleaños. Asistir means to attend. So I attended the concert. Yo asistí al concierto. Nosotros vimos la película en español. Alright, so now that we're in Chapter 8, you've seen a lot of vocabulary in Spanish classes. Some of the vocab that you've seen has featured school vocabulary. We've learned about food, the family, house, sports. Recently we learned about medical terms, hobbies, and activities in your free time. I'm going to go pretty quickly through these, but just so you can kind of get an idea of what the vocabulary is so far. In Unit 2, La familia y la casa, we learn words like hermano, primo, hijo, mascota, mayor, menor. And then about the house, we learn words like los cuartos, el comedor, la cocina, la ciudad. Unit 3 was about school. We learned a lot of new verbs here. Those were the first kind of verbs that we saw in Spanish. So we learned the verbs hablar, estudiar, escuchar, mirar, contestar, trabajar, necesitar, comprar. Chapter 4 was our food unit, where we learned words like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, desayuno, almuerzo, cena. We also learned some new verbs like tomar, comer, beber, and food vocabulary like pollo, hamburguesa, ensalada, queso, cereal. Now getting to Unit 5, where we started this year with sports, we learned words like los deportes, el béisbol, jugar, empezar, comenzar, ganar, lanzar, guardar. Unit 6 was about the medical vocabulary and Sarah and a star. So we learned adjectives like happy, sad, alegre, triste. We learned enojado, calmo, tranquilo, nervioso, and also words like la conducta, la energía, paciente, impaciente. And then at the doctor's office, words like la consulta, el médico, la farmacia, examinar, recetar, vender. Chapter 7 was our winter and summer activities. So we learned el verano, el invierno, la arena, la ola, el sol, practicar, nadar, bucear. And then some of the winter words were esquiar, el pico, la montaña, el principiante, guantes, botas. And finally, some words from Unit 8. This is our unit En Tu Tiempo Libre, your free time. We learned about la banda, el cantante, la película, el museo, un cuadro, la fiesta, el regalo, el maní, and then words like algo, alguien, siempre. The last thing I want to get into in today's video is the culture that we've learned too. We learned Latino culture like Dia de los Muertos, which is celebrated mostly in Mexico. Recently we learned about Christmas celebrations in Spanish-speaking countries. We've also learned about different parties in Spanish-speaking countries like La Quinceañera. Geography, we've learned about the Central and South American countries, the Caribbean Spanish-speaking countries, and also about Spain. We've learned about their capitals and the large number of Spanish speakers also in the United States, which is more than 50 million. Hope you've enjoyed Spanish 2 so far this year. Remember, if you ever have any questions, make sure to ask me. You can ask me here on Google Classroom, send me an email. Always go back and look at the videos, look at the past notes if you ever need help. Have a great break.